bring in my good Joe Fortunato, film study professor. He's taking us to film school this morning. And he is going to go down a road of a franchise that has been around since I can remember. And I'll let Joe take the story from there. Good morning, Mr. Fortunato. Go ahead and take it.
Good morning, Ray. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, this is one I've been looking forward to doing for a while now, and that is Godzilla from 1954. In fact, we're actually going to be almost talking about two movies today because I'm going to mainly talk about the original Godzilla from the Japanese Godzilla from 1954, but we're also going to kind of incorporate the American re-edit. I don't want to say remake from 1956, 2 years later, that was subtitled Godzilla King of the Monsters and added or inserted, maybe is a better way, Raymond Burr as a American reporter who comes to Tokyo and witnesses the city's destruction by Godzilla, who, of course, was awakened from his undersea hibernation by atom bomb testing. So kind of two movies-ish, if you want to call them that, although, again, really just a re-edit. But generally speaking, let's go back to the original here. It was directed by the great Ishiro Honda, and the film itself spawned 37 sequels. You talked about a long-running franchise, and that's the record for the longest-running continuous film series made by one studio, at least. The producer, Tomoyuki Tanaka, got the idea for Godzilla while returning on a flight from Indonesia. He was looking down at the water and sort of began imagining, hey, what would be below the surface? And he asked himself, what if there was this big monster near the Bikini Island that was awakened by the shock of the H-bomb testings that they did there. And the energy from the bomb affected the monster, gave him unique features and powers. And what if this monster invades Japan? So it was that simple flight that gave birth to probably the most beloved movie monster of all time, Godzilla. Now, as I mentioned, the scenes with Raymond Burr were added to the Japanese version. And again, maybe a better word is inserted, because the running time is actually shorter on the American version. The original runtime for the original movie is 1 hour and 36 minutes. The recut version is 1 hour and 20 minutes. So yeah, they added some stuff with Raymond Burr, but they also cut out a little bit too. And I think, at least I grew up, and I think probably most people in the United States kind of grew up with the American version being shown on television, Saturday morning, things like that. But since then, in recent decades, I think the original has kind of taken over as the one that most people see and revere. The original was called Gojira, and a lot of people think that the Americans renamed it Godzilla, but that wasn't the case, actually. That name Godzilla came from the Toho Studios, and the name Gojira is a combination of the Japanese words for gorilla and whale. So, a big hulking thing, a creature of great size and strength. And it was, that was the original name of the film. The Godzilla has really become was really the first Japanese film and Japanese pop culture export to receive widespread notoriety all over the world. And even today, it's really, you go to Tokyo and there's statues of Godzilla and things like that. So, Japanese culture is very proud of Godzilla, and it comes to represent their world and their universe.
Joe, it's interesting too when you talk about the franchise of Godzilla. When this first movie, the original, came out, and I remember watching the original, we were terrified. Godzilla gets awakened. Through the decades, Godzilla has gone from evil monster to good monster to evil monster to good monster. They've gone all over the place with this guy.
Very much so. I mean, like you said, when you got 37 odd films, and you're right. And a lot of the sort of 60s and 70s versions of Godzilla was very campy. Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, Godzilla versus King Kong, Godzilla versus Mothra. It was always Godzilla versus something.
Yeah.
And we even had a baby Godzilla, or son of Godzilla. So there was a lot of that kind of. I'm going to kindly say nonsense because I enjoyed those movies, but the original was a very serious movie. A couple of things about the production: they were originally thought about stop motion animation for Godzilla, but they rejected that because of the amount of time it would take. And frankly, they just didn't really have enough people in Japan at that time with the experience and technique that they would need to do that. And it's very influential, not only to us as viewers. Director George Lucas cites the film's miniatures as an inspiration for the special effects he did in Star Wars. Spielberg, in the book Making of Jurassic Park, cites Godzilla King of the Monsters, the American version, as an inspiration for Jurassic Park and how that kind of feel. The Godzilla suit, of course, is very famous, and it was so hot inside. And I kind of skipped a step there, but I didn't use stop motion. We actually used a man in a suit and stomping on miniature villages and miniature representation of Tokyo. But the suit was so hot inside that the actor would frequently faint. In fact, the temperatures got up to 140 degrees, if you can believe that, under the hot studio lights. And it was not uncommon for like a cup of sweat to be drained from the suit every time they did it. And he could actually barely walk. And by the way, the actor is, for the fans out there, Haru Nakajima, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But he could really barely walk in the original costume because it weighed over 230 pounds.
Oh my.
They built a second suit that was a little lighter at 200 pounds, but that's still pretty crazy. And Godzilla's famous roar, which is unmistakable and sort of, I really need it as a ringtone, I'm not going to lie. But the sound department tried numerous animal roars for Godzilla, but they kind of felt it was unsuitable for an animal of that immense size. So the music director came up with Godzilla's roar by rubbing a resin-coated leather glove up and down the strings of a contrabass, a double bass, a big, bass, the upright bass that people play. So they rubbed the leather gloves, and then they reverberated that recording in an empty water tank, and that is the sound that Godzilla makes. And his thunderous footsteps as he marched through Tokyo was a man beating a kettle drum with a knotted rope. So very interesting sound effects for that. Raymond Burr, as I mentioned, was put into the American re-edit. And the popular belief is he did all of his scenes in one day, but it actually took about 6 days. And, excuse me, also contrary to popular belief, Raymond Burr was actually quite proud of his association with the film. A lot of people sort of thought, oh, that was some dumb reimagining of a monster movie that I did earlier in my career, because he would come back later for the premiere of the 1985 Japanese sequel. So he embraced it as a character later in his life.
Joe, I think when we talk about Godzilla, and I'm sure you're just like me, it's a memory ringer for me. When you brought up the idea of doing Godzilla today, it goes back. It was the very first movie that I ever went to friends with at an old movie house in Pennsylvania, and I saw Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. And it was the very first time I ever went to a theater. And I'm sure I'm not the only one listening this morning that says, oh, I remember this. I remember going here. And that's what's intriguing about this franchise. Like you said, so many movies, so many decades of putting this thing together.
Yeah. And, you're exactly right, because my memory is more Saturday morning matinee. In fact, I think for those in the Ohio area, I think I watched it on Superhost, which would have been sort of my memory of that. And I've really loved Godzilla ever since. Just a couple of quick little facts before we run out of time here. The original design, this is crazy. The original design for Godzilla had a head shaped like a mushroom cloud. If you can imagine how wacky that would have been. Yeah. Glad that didn't really take off. And I believe appropriately so, in 2004, which was the 50th anniversary of the Japanese release, Godzilla was given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So Godzilla does have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which I believe is appropriate, and I'm glad that's happened.
I imagine it's one more than one just little cement square when we talk about Godzilla's footprint for sure. Joe, great stuff. Good memory ringer. Good visit one of the best franchises, really, when you talk about movie history, and that's Godzilla. Great stuff this morning, Joe. We'll do it again next week.
Okay, I look forward to it. See you then.
All right, good job. There you go. Film study.